Hello, everyone. I send my regards from the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners in the United States, or NARUC, and very much appreciate ERRA hosting me here at this conference and making it possible for me to join you. The topic of the panel is grid integration and the management solutions for increased penetration of renewables and collaboration to meet future demand. In this presentation, I'm going to introduce how the United States is experiencing the issue, discuss the challenges that many states in the United States are facing, and then discuss some of the strategies that states and the federal government have pursued. So in the United States, energy policy and implementation occurs both at the level of the 50 states as well as at the federal level. The states have authority to determine policies for how energy is generated, whereas the federal government has authority over policies involving electricity transactions between the states and transmission between the states. In addition to state policy, customer and utility goals for non-emitting energy also drive growth in the development of renewable energy. The result is a wide variety of policies promoting renewable and non-emitting generation, as well as fossil fuel generation, depending on state policy. Experience with renewable penetration, therefore, is not uniform across the different states. Also, due to increased production of natural gas in the United States, this is increasingly being used for dispatchable electric generation and to integrate renewables, providing load-following service. There is also a resurgence of dispatchable resources that are non-emitting, such as nuclear power, both traditional nuclear and advanced modular nuclear generation, as well as geothermal production. Finally, the change in the presidential administration will have an impact on energy policies through Congress and the priorities for funding, although this is a developing process and the states continue their work. The U.S. faces several significant challenges in grid integration and management, which I don't think are unique to the United States. As this energy landscape evolves, these changes arise due to increased reliance on intermittent renewable energy resources, increased customer adoption of more decentralized energy systems, reduced system operator control and visibility of distributed resources, and the increased presence of inverter-based resources and a reduction of inertia-based spinning resources. The U.S. is also experiencing a significant increase in demand for energy by customers, data centers, and manufacturing, as well as barriers to siting and building new generation and transmission to meet that new demand, and increases in cost and availability of materials and services which impact the affordability of energy. So key strategies to address the challenges are emerging at both the state level and at the federal level through our Department of Energy and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, with a focus on ensuring a reliable and resilient energy grid. The primary challenge is how to evolve from the grid of the past to the current and future grid. The grid, as we've been talking about, must be able to manage both variable and local generation that is multi-directional in nature, but allows for flexible and dynamic measures to ensure this resilient and reliable grid. The grid and the resources on the grid simply require more management going forward. So I'll discuss resource management techniques such as demand flexibility and management, storage, and virtual power plants. And I'll also discuss some grid management strategies to ensure grid stability and manage variability, including grid optimization and reliability standards. These strategies involve technological innovation, policy reforms, investment in infrastructure, as well as increased collaboration between energy providers, customers, grid operators, and regulators. To smooth out the variability and intermittency of renewable energy, as well as avoid curtailment, utilities and grid operators can use several technologies and management techniques, such as energy storage and demand flexibility. Energy storage comes in many flavors, as the prior speaker mentioned, including reservoir storage for hydroelectric generation, pumped storage, flywheels, compressed air, thermal energy storage, and battery energy storage, and I'll be focusing primarily on battery energy storage. This can shift the excess energy to a later period and release it to address peak usage periods, avoid curtailment, and support reliability. To use the state of California as an example, following 2 separate loss of load events in the year 2020 due to a lack of capacity in the evening hours when solar ceases to generate, California set a battery storage target of 1.3 gigawatts by 2020 and has achieved 13.3 gigawatts of storage by 2024. The state has a new goal of 52 gigawatts of battery electric storage and 4 gigawatts of long-duration energy storage by 2045. This additional storage has allowed the state to avoid future outages during those evening hours. Some states like Washington, where I am from, and that's Washington State, not Washington, D.C., are seeking long-term storage beyond the 4 to 8 hours that lithium-ion chemistries provide, because there's going to be a need for grid management during longer-term events. Some technologies using different chemistries suggest a release duration of 100 hours or more, which can really help go across a 2 to 3 day event, which in the northern climates with snow and ice, when generally the wind stops blowing and there isn't as much solar, can really help get through an event. So utilities in Washington and other states are looking to utilities to evaluate these technologies in their integrated resource plans. Another method for managing variability of generation includes demand or load flexibility, focusing on that usage of energy. Similar to the philosophy of energy efficiency, where the highest value resources are the ones you do not use, demand management allows utilities and grid operators to not build expensive peaking units and can reduce costs for customers. Demand flexibility can be managed either through incentive pricing or direct control of demand in residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. Demand flexibility can also be aggregated as a product in wholesale markets, similar to aggregation of DERs. At the federal level, FERC entered Order 2222 in the year 2020 to allow aggregation of DERs, demand response, storage, and EV charging to participate in wholesale markets, and markets are continuing to develop rules for this product. And looking to the state of New York as an example, New York's Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program is well established and encourages businesses and consumers to reduce their power during peak demands or periods of low renewable generation. The program includes combined heat and power, energy efficiency, storage, controllable loads, demand response, and more, and has achieved 40 megawatts of peak demand savings and is tied to utility performance incentives. In Texas, the wholesale electric market, or ERCOT, includes a very strong financial demand response product, encouraging consumers to reduce usage during periods of peak stress. And I include a link to the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab study that provides an overview of demand flexibility and response programs in the United States. Next, I'll talk about virtual power plants, and this is another resource that's being studied and used in the United States to address managing the various systems. And virtual power plants are systems that aggregate and integrate multiple resources to provide power to the grid, the opposite of demand flexibility. VPPs include distributed energy resources, behind-the-meter batteries, electric vehicles and chargers, electric water heaters, thermostats, smart building controls, and flexible commercial and industrial loads that can balance electricity and demand and supply to provide utility scale and utility grade grid services like a traditional power plant. VPPs allow for the integration of renewables and demand flexibility at the distribution level, which can be more affordable than building large central station power plants or peaking units. VPPs can balance electricity demand and supply, and utility-scale grid services, or VPPs, can act as a peaking resource for effective peak load management. There are currently about 33 gigawatts of virtual power plants operating in the United States. In the states of Hawaii, Massachusetts, and New York, utilities and third-party providers are providing low-cost, low-emissions peaking capacity. In the states of Hawaii, Utah, and Vermont, utilities are using VPPs to directly control customer battery systems to provide system balancing. In the last administration, the Department of Energy produced a number of studies on reaching commercial liftoff for a variety of technologies, including VPPs. For your reference, I've included a link in the slide to the DOE report on pathways to commercial liftoff for virtual power plants. This report identifies a number of actions that need to be taken to make VPPs more effective and affordable, including increasing standardizing VPP operations, as well as communications and control systems to avoid one-off or utility-specific systems, simplifying VPP enrollment, integrating programs into resource and system planning processes, including VPPs in incentive or performance and cost recovery mechanisms. So while VPPs are a relatively new development, utilities and grid operators are using them to benefit the system and consumers while we're waiting for more systems to be integrated into the grid. Next, the US electric grid infrastructure is designed, much like other systems, for centralized power generation and predictable demand, requiring modernization and optimization to handle the growing complexity of the system. Upgrading and modernizing the grid to be more flexible with technologies like smart controls, advanced sensors, can help manage this dynamic flow of electricity on both the distribution and transmission systems, providing utilities and grid operators greater situational awareness and visibility into operation of the grid and distributed generation. There are several steps that utilities, grid operators, and regulators can take to optimize grid operations to increase the reliability and resilience of the systems. At the distribution level, regulators can encourage and utilities can adopt advanced distribution management systems and distributed energy management systems. These systems allow a utility or a grid operator to monitor, control, optimize, and predict operations on the distribution system, as well as improve the performance of distributed renewables. The state of Michigan has approved the use of such systems for its utilities. California and Hawaii have invested in smart grid technologies to allow for better management of renewable energy's variability, including sensors, real-time data, and automation to better match supply with demand and quickly respond to disruptions in generation. For more information, I included in NERG's Smart Grid report, and I've included a link to the report in the slide. On transmission systems, transmission providers and grid operators can employ a number of technologies that allow greater situational awareness and allow control over the flow of electricity over transmission lines to avoid congestion and curtailments due to congestion. These grid-enhancing technologies include the use of synchrophasers and advanced power flow controllers. Finally, the federal government has developed reliability standards in response to several grid frequency disturbances due to the failure of inverter-based solar resources in the states of California and Texas. And when I say failure, I mean they all tripped off at the same time, and so we're trying to address how to avoid that issue. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, which is the North American Reliability Regulator, has been developing standards for inverter-based resources connected to the bulk power system. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has to approve those rules and has done so. And these rules, which go into effect this month, are intended to ensure the grid can manage frequency incursions as inverter-based resources replace spinning synchronous inertia-based resources. Under these rules, there will be no exceptions based on capacity of a resource. All grid-connected inverter-based resources must comply. Resources have to register with NERC as a generator owner, and they have to meet certain reliability standards, including those related to frequency and voltage protection. The intent is to ensure that resources will ride through normal system disturbances that fall within predetermined criteria. And the importance of such reliability standards is clear, in particular after the recent disturbance in Spain. Now, I understand, as the prior speaker mentioned, it's a system issue, and a lot goes on in a system, and we need to identify what happens. But the failure of inverter-based systems all at once, when a fault goes through and all the solar systems go off at once, is something we need to focus on from the grid level and grid management level, but also think about grid-forming inverters and other things that can help with the inertia to keep them going on. So I've provided a link to the NERC site discussing this rule for your information. So I thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you about the various technologies and programs in the United States to integrate renewable energy resources and ensure reliable grid management. Many of these technologies are being perfected, but all will be helpful to ensure that the grid remains reliable and affordable. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.